All right, so I did a video actually talking about Amazon in New York City that not that long ago, whenever basically they were facing a lot of backlash. I didn't post that video. I was actually going to do it, but I'm a turtle when it comes to posting videos. And then things happen before I get a chance to post them. But in that video was a little bit harsh actually on Amazon, and it was a little bit harsh on some of the folks, some of the politicians. So it's good. I probably didn't post that, but I'm going to actually tell you kind of what my impressions of this are. Right. So Amazon chose two locations for its HQ2 instead of one, which was a big mistake. So they chose to go to DC, basically DC area, and Long Beach, part of New York. Now, it never made sense to go to New York City. I said that then, I say it now. It didn't make any sense. When Jeff Bezos sent a team there and the news conference was announced that they were choosing New York, the governor was telling him that New York is a union city, and that even though Amazon is definitely not a union company, that they will work with us. They're going to grow to love this union city. That's basically saying that even though you're not a part of the union, you're going to pretty much be a union or be open to it here. That was already a big sign that Amazon should have noticed well before that, right? Amazon basically left. Here's the situation. This is what I think, and some people have shared the same view. Amazon, sorry, I was dusting earlier, and then never mind. So Amazon could have easily kept all of its business in the Puget Sound region. They could have done that, but I think to a great degree they threw a hissy fit because of what was going on in Seattle. And I'm not saying that they don't have a right to be upset, but unlike what they're doing, the same thing Seattle did. Seattle, basically, the leaders there, and I'm going to try to keep names out of things, right? But the leaders there wanted to charge a head tax, meaning that every person that you have in your company, they're going to charge you a tax on that, and it was a pretty substantial amount that would have to be paid, and that was to tackle the homeless situation in Seattle. That was a wrong move. I said it then. That didn't last long. It was a week, and then it was over with. Amazon fought it. Prior to that, other things that have happened in Seattle, including certain development ideas and transportation ideas, Amazon was not a part of that, and they felt that they were entitled to have an opinion as to what should have been done, right? Part of this is ego, to be honest with you. And so it's ego in terms of Seattle, because a lot of times I think politicians feel, it's not just in this city, but governments around the world even, feel that they are what make the country, or they are what makes the city, and that's just absolutely false. What makes the city or the country are the people and the businesses that are built by those people. That's what makes the world go around. And you have some cities where people are attracted to it by certain things. Now, does government do things to make things a little bit more appealing? Sure. Having good infrastructure and parks and different things like that, nice. It does. But I think that there should be this more symbiotic relationship where cities should ask the citizens more about what their opinions are, and businesses what their opinions are, as opposed to being kind of hardly ever seen. Most mayors of most American cities, I can't speak of other places, but most mayors, you don't really see them. Most politicians, you don't really see them unless they're trying to do a conference, or they want to take credit for bringing a company there, even though a company a lot of times have chosen a place to move to long before, and they're basically asking for a subsidy. But and so then government helps with that. But other than that, you have a lot of, pounding on the chest saying that look at what I've done, when typically it's businesses that make these decisions, right? And you also have a situation where companies can get so big that they think that they pretty much are that they're above it all, right? And that's kind of Amazon, you get that feeling. And that kind of turns people off here, and it turns people off in other places. That they are just, you should beg for us. Amazon went about this whole thing the wrong way from the get-go. For one, it shouldn't have never decided to have an HQ2. That was stupid. And it should have looked at the Puget Sound region. It thumbs its nose at Tacoma, which is stupid because you have more affordability here. You have a lot of spaces that you can actually expand at. You're in a state that understands how Amazon actually works. The governor here understands how Amazon works. The local leadership here understands how Amazon works. And the culture that Amazon creates, the local leadership, even though sometimes they may disagree with it, they understand it. You're not going to get that understanding outside of other places so quickly. So instead of expanding to Tacoma and maybe going to Spokane, Amazon wants to locate HQ2s in other places and use the excuse that they were looking for more tech talent, which they can't find here, which is not true. They were looking for a way to basically find a new home to put their HQ2 and basically use leverage anytime they needed to use leverage. And it backfired in New York's case because of the simple fact it doesn't make sense for a company, and I've said this before, it's the same thing with Seattle, and you have businesses who just flood into Seattle because it's hot. Seattle has a duplication of everything. When it comes to any retail business, any restaurant you can think of, they have a saturation point of that. New York City has a saturation point of everything. You can't think of a business or a company or a name brand that New York City doesn't have. It has everything. It was stupid. The only decision that I can say that Amazon did that makes sense is Nashville. Nashville, Tennessee makes sense because they have basically an Amazon hub there, and they're trying this new concept, and that makes sense. It's got the right size. It's hiring 5,000 people, I believe. I forget now, but it's hiring a decent amount of people, and it makes sense. The city size makes sense. It's going to be in downtown Nashville, having hubs all over the place. I can understand that. Amazon already has offices all over the country anyway. That makes sense. But to put a whole new headquarters someplace else is kind of stupid. And then not only that, you then say, instead of saying that we're going to put 50,000 people, you slice that in half and say 25,000. And then later you tell people that not all of those 25,000 are going to be tech workers. You're basically going to cut that in half as well. And a lot of the people are going to be your admin, your janitorial service, HR, that type of thing. So it really and truly was a bad play for Amazon. Now, the DC office, some people will argue that makes sense because they're trying to be closer to a lot of what Jeff Bezos owns. He owns a home there. He also has the Washington Post, I think. So it makes sense, right? And politicians. But, again, you're in a place where they don't care. I'd say the people, but politicians don't really care. They're because they have to face the people back at their home state. People in Montana don't care about Amazon in Washington, D.C., or people in Alabama, or people in Kansas, or places where you don't have a big Amazon presence. They're looking for their leadership to represent their state and their state's best interest. So, again, it doesn't make sense to actually go there either. I get you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket up in the Puget Sound region or the Pacific Northwest, but literally putting headquarters in different parts of the country to get influence, which is kind of what they're doing, doesn't make any sort of sense. And then you have politicians who are very new to being in politics, who are basically just average, everyday people. I'm not going to mention names, who really and truly are throwing around their weight and making very bad decisions, right? I think that when you go too far extreme on things, it really does. Things sound good on paper. Like there's a lot of things I can talk about that's great on paper and it's wonderful. But to put it in practice is a disaster. And you have some folks up there in New York who really and truly don't understand at all business. They don't really understand politics, but they don't understand business. And then you take a city that has everything, and then you also have a city that has unions. It just doesn't make sense to go there. They don't need Amazon. I said that before. There's other cities you can go to in New York if you wanted to be in New York that made sense. Albany, New York, Buffalo, New York, Syracuse. Nope. They chose the biggest of all, and they fell the hardest. New York doesn't need you. And when other cities were basically trying to get Amazon's attention, it didn't do that. And the mayor of New York said he still felt confident that Amazon was going to come, that this wasn't a problem. But he failed to understand that Amazon has had a lot of issues up in Seattle because people complained that you have such a wealthy company that really doesn't help that much. When you look at what Bill Gates is doing around the planet, and the fact that he and his wife has contributed so much for the benefit of people, and you look at Warren Buffett and how much, if Bill Gates kept all his money, he would be much more wealthier than what he is. If Warren Buffett kept all of his money, he'd be much more wealthier than what he is. But those are two individuals who have really done a lot with philanthropy, and Jeff Bezos is just now getting on that. And he did it after a lot of pressure. And this is not a rain on to Jeff Bezos, but basically you have some people that are a little bit ticked off here that he turns his back on places that really and truly should have been the next option. I'm not saying put a headquarters. I think the headquarters should stay in Seattle, and I think that having satellite offices, and of course it makes sense to go to Bellevue. That's where he started Amazon, was in Bellevue. I get it. And he's actually expanding operations there in Bellevue and putting stuff in, and that's great. But there are other places here that could have made a lot more sense. He could have had offices here, a hub here in Tacoma, a hub possibly in Olympia, a larger operation over in Spokane. He could have invested in the state. He could have also invested in the state's education because obviously they rely a lot on IT. He could have helped with homelessness. Instead of it being all over the country, he could have focused on homelessness in the city that is complaining the most about Amazon and them not helping with homelessness. I don't understand why that wasn't done. So the same thing that he's a little bit upset about, or Amazon's upset about, the fact that no one consulted them about transportation and the projection of the city, he kind of did the same thing. And I want to say he's the boss. Now his executives may make decisions, so that's fine, but he basically, and there's others too that do the same thing that Amazon does here, and they don't really invest back into their community. So you don't get a lot of support or sympathy when you do that. Amazon has made a lot of areas here grow tremendously. They made Seattle what it is. Some people don't like that. Some people do. It has really helped the economy here greatly, and that's wonderful. But to really and truly go all the way across the country to a city that doesn't need it doesn't make sense. And I go back to what I said before, that when I said Atlanta made the most sense to me is because you have a city that is that's not such a unionized type city. You have a city that's warm weather. You have a city that is still close to a lot of major population centers, great airport, college system there is really, really good. It's an up and coming city in many ways. In many ways. More so than even DC, yet that's the place that they actually chose as well as New York. And so it doesn't surprise me that they're pulling out of New York, because the city itself said early on this was kind of what their intentions were. And then you have other people who are really kind of extremist, in my view, that were in charge of some of the future decisions for Amazon and that location and the sites that they were using. And then you have other people who are from there, who are also just giving in their opinion, but they have a lot of power. And that is what sunk the deal. So they should have stayed here and opened up hub sites in different locations. That would not have attracted as many people. B, when they did their exploration, they should have did exactly what Apple did and basically find locations that were appealing to them, that they already have some sort of understanding of, like they did with Austin, Texas, and expand their operations there. Apple did an HQ2 as well, but they didn't go and do it the way that Amazon did. They didn't catch any flack hardly. They've been welcomed with open arms. Amazon basically got a lot of information from a lot of cities and from a lot of consumers, and at the end of the day, it's a little bit about greed. So, when you look at the fact that they got all this free information, because understand, like, things like demographics and income and all that stuff is pretty expensive. If you hire a firm to get all that information, it's pretty pricey. And then if you add in the hundreds of cities that participated in this, they're getting information from Canada to Mexico to the United States. They're getting information from all of those places for free. And they were going to get incentives to locate into those places. So it really just looks like, and then when you look at Jeff Bezos, who's the world's richest man, who doesn't need any incentives, you're not going to have sympathy. Good job that you did great in terms of becoming super wealthy. That's great. I think that people would be happy about that, and they are. Good job on making, Seattle such a hot market. There's some people that don't like it, but overall, I mean, great job. You're shaping the economy here. But understand that there are forces greater than you, and that you now are in a situation where you have to find either another location or invest everything into DC or come back home to here and focus on where you are. Hold on one second. Okay, I apologize. I got a whole bunch of messages all at one time, and so yeah, it's I apologize. I can't really. The thing is, I can't turn notifications off because then I miss stuff, and so that's a big issue. So I apologize for all those dings. But so anyhow, getting back to this, now Amazon has to figure out what they're going to do. I think, again, having an HQ, the original HQ in Seattle is where to stick with the plan. And I think that DC should be a hub. A larger hub than what you have in Nashville. And I think that would be it. Definitely expanding in other places. I think that makes sense. But already it's going to be on troubled waters, because if you look at it, DC is going to be the only place that's going to be paying for subsidies like this, big, large subsidies, and that could also spell disaster. Seattle benefited. They didn't have to provide subsidies. Bellevue doesn't provide subsidies. And Amazon did fine. So, again, bad strategy from the beginning. And now you have a dynamic market here in Tacoma that has altered itself. After we lost the bid, Tacoma just basically dusted itself off, expected it, because you have a very strong elitist attitude here. What's repelling some people from Seattle is this elitist attitude. It has nothing to do with wealth, because there are people here who are wealthy, right? Some people would consider us myself and Noelle wealthy, right? I don't think we are, but some people may consider that, right? it's not about the wealth factor. It's about this whole elitist attitude of I'm better than the next person, or and that is what pushes people away from Seattle. In addition to the cost of living, it kind of just changes people's view. And when you have this elitist style attitude, which is very heavy also in Bellevue too, some people don't, they could live there. They can afford to live there, but they just don't want to. So they live in other places outside of there where it's still kind of hoity-toity, but it's not this elite style, I'm better than you type view. So I think that also rubbed people the wrong way in New York as well. You know what I mean? So anyhow, I'm going to get off here. Hate to ramble. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that New York basically said no, and it doesn't surprise me that they backed out of New York. We'll see what happens. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.